Thank you for calling the Venue Helpline, the podcast where venues share their biggest frustrations, toughest challenges, and behind the scenes headaches. If you run a venue or work at one and you've ever thought, oh, why is this so hard? You're in the right place. Each week, you'll hear practical solutions from vetted experts who've been there, done that, and know what actually works. Because running a venue is hard enough. You shouldn't have to figure it out alone. Now, let me put you on a brief hold for the next available helper.
Hi, glad you called. It's Shannon here with the Venue Help Desk. Tell me what's going on.
When a couple is asking for a room block at the hotel, what is the best sales strategy to approach that with? Oftentimes, I try to divert away from room block contracts because it slows down the selling process and distracts the couple from keeping their eyes on the prize, booking our event space for their big day.
Oh, I know exactly how frustrating that can be. As somebody who worked at a hotel for many years, this was also something that really aggravated me. See, because you've got a couple in front of you, you've worked so hard, get the lead, get him in the door for the tour, and now you feel like you've hit this roadblock. Couples are often asking about room blocks right away, and then it feels like a distraction because you're trying to close the sale of them just choosing the event space. This is such a common frustration for any kind of venue property that has accommodations. It's not just you, it happens to everyone. But room block discussions can delay that decision. It creates added complexity and it's a shift. The couple's focus kind of makes this quick shift away from what really matters, which is securing their wedding space. When a couple is choosing to go and tour at a hotel, here's the situation. They're looking for a space and a place that has accommodations. They've maybe have this vision in their head of a wedding weekend opportunity, or maybe they're also thinking, we have so many guests coming in from out of town, it'd be great to host my wedding at a space that has everything there. But they often are completely misguided on what a room block actually is. They're thinking it's guaranteed free rooms or zero risk. They can just block as many rooms as they want and they don't have to do anything about it. So, negotiating the room block contract itself could often involve, as it did in my world, other hotel departments, which slows that momentum in the sales cycle, right? I just wanted them to choose their space, but I've got to start talking to reservations and looking at blocks and all of the situations that come with that. And if you handle this situation poorly with a couple on the front, they might feel pressured or they get confused by the process or they get really overwhelmed. And that leads to the delay in them actually booking the venue. So, as a sales team, the goal is for you to keep focused. You want to try to sell both your space and the room block all at once instead of keeping the priorities clear, because that's what the couple's kind of demanding of you. All right, let's start working on fixing this problem because we know it's going to happen. They came to you because this is what they're looking for. So you've got to figure out how can you overcome it in advance. So the first thing we need to do is we need to reframe the entire conversation. From the beginning of talking to them and communicating with them, you need to start focusing on positioning the event space as the primary decision and the value driver. Think about that. Choosing your space that you fall in love with is the first focus. You've got to start working that into all of your language. You want to acknowledge the importance of accommodations, but reassuring the couple that those details can be handled after you secure the date. You can use some different and simplified languages. First, let's make sure your wedding date and the space are locked in. Once that's secure, I'll walk you through how we can take care of your guests. But with that being said, you've got to make sure you have the accommodations available, right? So one of the questions I used to like to start when I was asking them just to confirm their guest count, if as a hotel property, I knew that people were going to come and stay with us. So I would ask the question, what percentage of your guests are coming from out of town? And that would help, right? So let's use the number of 100 guests. They'd say, oh, 60% of them are coming from out of town. Okay, great. So out of 100, I'm down to 60. And now assume 2 per room, just to keep it simple. So now we're talking about 30 rooms. So I'd say to them, do you think some of your local guests would stay as well? It sounds like you might need somewhere between 15 and 30 hotel rooms based upon about 60 people staying here for 1 to 2 nights. We'd start having those conversations and I'd educate them. See, because you never want to book a couple into a space where you don't have the rooms available. It's that marriage as a hotel, right? You're trying to marry available space with also available room nights. See, my hotel property was intimate and small. We only had 180 rooms. Now, some of you might be like an Airbnb or bed and breakfast property and you're thinking like, Shannon, 180 rooms is a lot. Well, it's not a lot when we would host 4, 5, 6 weddings in a weekend. 180 rooms goes real fast if our average wedding was taking anywhere from 20 to 30 of them. They go really quick. So you really need to start that conversation by reframing the mindset. You need to teach them that we need to pick the venue space first. Just make sure you're matching date availability to availability of rooms. So you've got to ask that question. Now, let's create a 2-step path for the sale. You're going to train your sales team or yourself that step 1 is booking the wedding space and step 2 is the accommodations. Again, you're reframing language to say this over and over again. You want to have that templated language to pause the room block negotiations until after the contract is signed. Now, as the hotel that I worked for, we actually married them together. I actually did not stop the process. I kept it moving and it was all in one contract because what we found was it was easier for me to get the contract signed with the couple if they knew that the room block was secured as a part of it. They weren't stressed. No one else in my property was going to sell those rooms out from under me, which if you've got a group sales team or other sales team, that can happen. We made it part of the process. So one of the things we did to get ahead of it, though, as part of the tour process, is we had a simple FAQ and a handout that we gave them at the tour and we reviewed about room blocks. It allowed the opportunity to satisfy their curiosity without derailing the sale. They had that FAQ at the point at which they chose their date. We could guide them through pulling that FAQ back out. So we had a general idea of how many rooms they needed. There was a calculator on there of how many rooms, doing the math that I just did with you, 100 guests, what percentage are coming from out of town? Great. How many of them do you think would be staying? And then we adjust the room count accordingly, assuming not 100% of them would be staying at the property. Okay, the next step we want to focus on is using room blocks as an added value, not the focus. See, when a couple is choosing a hotel property, like I already mentioned, they're really looking for a place they can stay. It's such an added value that the guests can stay there. It was one of our biggest differentiators up against my biggest competitor. I could talk about the fact how the guests could just come. We host the after party on property, the rehearsal dinner the night before. It was an entire 3-day party because we had accommodations. That allowed us to turn a wedding from just a 5-hour party into a 3-day affair. And that was also one of our taglines. We believe that weddings should be a 3-day event, not a 5-hour party. And it worked to increase sales and also increase revenue within the property. So you want to position that block as a convenient perk that the couples gain by choosing your hotel, not the hurdle that they have to solve right away, especially if they're taking advantage of booking further out and further in advance. You want to highlight all these benefits as a part of your tour process and sales process: the guest experience, the ease of logistics, discounted room rates if they stay with you. And you want to avoid diving too heavy into contract terms until they've said, yes, I want to do the venue. See, it was all one contract for us. We could do the venue contracted with the rooms all at the same time. And that was our preferred method. If they weren't ready yet to talk about rooms, or we were super far out, or they weren't sure about numbers and wanted to review it with family, we would do a room block addendum. So that's another thing that you can use in your back pocket that we don't have to make that decision right now. Honestly, though, I was too busy to deal with addendums. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to educate them as part of the tour, give them the sheet of paper, the FAQs. I'm going to help them come up with some general numbers so that they're not over blocking or under blocking. We're in that safe zone in terms of attrition. Okay, now we want to streamline the internal process as a company. You want to work with your revenue management, front desk, reservations, whoever in your business, to create what I would call like a room block light, a simplified option specifically for weddings. So you don't want to lose the wedding booking because you haven't yet figured out the room block situation. So While our group sales department had a really strong, fast, hard attrition policy, of course we had a policy in the contract, but we made some shifts to it. We loosened it up just a little. Now, if you're a corporate hotel, this probably can't happen, but we worked as a team to figure out how we could get them to move forward. What were some extra steps we could check in at the room blocks along the way? What were some tools we could give them to help get those rooms booked faster? All of those things. You want to have some pre-approved language so the sales staff doesn't get bogged down too much in the legal and the contract details, especially if a separate department is handling this. You want to assure alignment. The couple shouldn't get conflicting information from what you tell them versus then what the reservations department tells them. Everyone has to be on the exact same page. Now, as a property that was room block heavy, we very rarely had weddings that didn't have a block. But there's a few things I want you to keep in your back pocket. First and foremost, you probably have dates at the hotel where the rooms are sold out. Maybe you could work with that reservations team to squeak out a honeymoon suite or maybe 2 or 3 rooms, but the rest of the hotel is sold out. The property I worked at, there was a huge annual event, which was a bike fest, a big old motorcycle fest. And during Bike Fest, every room was sold out at a premium. It was so expensive to get a room that weekend. We always held back 3 or 4 or 5 just in case we needed them in case of emergency. So weddings never wanted to come in and pay $400, $500 a night because it was a sold out weekend. But you know what I would do is I would keep dates like that in my back pocket so that I can pull it out for a couple on a budget. See, while Bike Fest came to the hotel to stay, we weren't the host hotel for the activities. We just had them all the sleeping rooms. So our food and beverage that weekend wasn't the best. On the hotel side, maybe, but on all the venues, there would be nothing happening because we didn't have any rooms. So what I would do is we would advertise those weekends to our local couples that didn't maybe need hotel rooms. All of their friends and family were coming in from the area. So you want to have dates like this where maybe you're sold out and you don't have the rooms available. And maybe you can build partnerships with other local properties near you, right? Maybe they might have the rooms so you can still sell the wedding and partner with them on the block. We had opportunities where we did this and we actually ran shuttle service to the other properties. We helped do all of that so that we could get the food and beverage booking. Another tip of something that doesn't really stop the sales process, but it was a very attractive thing because I had to overcome a really difficult situation where the couples would do the room block and then their attrition, meaning they had to release dates and release rooms by 30 days out. Well, you know how we all work in today's world. We're all last minute rock stars. I know sometimes I book the wedding hotel room the week of, 2 weeks before. I am the worst guest to have at the wedding because I can screw up the room block. One of the things that we did to overcome this and to really help guide our couples on to explain to them and help them understand attrition and how to get the couples booked is we gave them the exact wording that they could include on their wedding website. We also asked them if they were doing save the dates. And if they said, oh yeah, we're going to print a save the date and mail it out, whether it was a card or a photo or something like that, we offered to design custom postcards for them that we printed on our printer in the office. And we would just cut them into quarters that they could slip in the envelope. It said about the hotel room information, the block. It gave a QR code to the link where they could scan and go online and book and use the code. By doing that, you are getting people to start thinking about blocking and booking their room long before the invitations went out. Sometimes those save the dates went out a year in advance and they'd send out that save the date with our little printed card inside of it. And that would lead to immediate bookings on the hotel rooms. So you've got to get ahead of it and think about what are the objections of what comes to why I can't book this venue. Of course, you've got to have the rooms in your back pocket. I don't know if at your hotel property you can soft hold them without a contract. We couldn't. So for me, I really wrapped it into part of the sales process. When I was touring, we talked about room blocks. I toured a hotel room. We talked about it without it being too scary, but you've got to utilize your expertise. If you're listening to this episode and you're like, none of this makes any sense, I don't even understand what attrition is or any of those things, as a venue, you should actually get knowledgeable. Because if you're a venue that doesn't have hotel rooms, I bet that you're referring business to local hotels or you're partnering with other properties. You really should be able to understand the room block process. So this is what it looks like. The couple goes in and they kind of give an estimated number of rooms they need. They're signing a contract with a guarantee. So what that means is if they say, I need 20 hotel rooms for my wedding, this isn't a, okay, great, we'll hold them. And if nobody books, no big deal. They are guaranteeing them. Some hotels require a deposit, some hotels don't. But there's usually what's called attrition. And that means at 1, 2, or 3 points, as you get closer to, the couple has an opportunity to drop rooms. So let's say they book 20 rooms and that hotel has a 20% attrition. That means if the couple blocks 20 room nights and 20 rooms for that night, they're guaranteeing 80% of the rooms, right? So that would mean they can drop 4 rooms, but that means they're paying for 16 rooms either way. So you as the hotel person, your job is to guide them on the proper amount of rooms, making sure that they block enough rooms, but they don't overblock because you don't want them paying for rooms they don't need. It's all such a magical dance, but if you have the opportunity to do the block after the fact, that's fine. You just might be pushing it off because it's easier for you. But the reason they came to you in the first place is because they wanted a property that had the rooms and that the ease of putting it all into a bundle. So if you keep trying to dance around it and push it off, you might be turning them off of the sale. Room blocks don't really have to derail your sales process. You want to keep the focus on the wedding space first, then position accommodations as a supportive add-on. See, the hotel that I worked at when I first started working there, the rooms really needed a renovation. They were a little bit older. They weren't the cutest. So I actually never showed the rooms on a tour. I just put a picture of them into the brochure that we gave them to show them it. Because the more you make rooms part of the tour, the more they start thinking, oh, how many guests are staying? Now, somebody said, can we see the rooms? Of course, I took them to see the rooms, guys. But this is that conversation of not selling things that aren't really a primary. It's not really what they're there for. They might be there just looking at space first. When you reframe the sequencing of that sales conversation and you simplify the process down to let's look at the space first, and then we can talk about rooms and availability and things like that, hotel venues can actually protect that momentum and create a better client experience overall. But don't forget, don't ignore it. If they keep talking about it, it's a primary concern for them and you want to be able to help guide them through that process. You want to be the hotel or accommodations property that teaches them and trains them on how to make it work. Well, that's it for today's episode of the Venue Helpline. Thanks so much for listening. We love helping you tackle these real life frustrations. Before you go, here's one last thing. If you want to keep the conversation going, follow us over on Instagram at Venue Help Desk. And hey, if you know a hotel friend or somebody who works at a venue with accommodations that needs to listen to this, send them this episode.